Whew. All right, I'm going to introduce you, and then I'm just going to ask you some questions, and it's just going to be a conversation, and it, flows, right?
Okay, yeah. Conversations Unhinged.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
Never had that before.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ava Hoffman, and this is Outside the Lines, a line writer podcast where I interview line writer creators and talk to them about the artistry behind their tracks. Jade, who is known as Branches, has been creating and releasing line writer tracks onto her YouTube channel since 2018. In that time, she has developed a sensitive and personal approach to track making that places the artistic and emotional aspects of line writer to the forefront of her work. Her unique voice, influenced by her experiences in the Chain Reaction, Geometry Dash, and music-making communities, continues to be a breath of fresh air and an urgent perspective on what it means to make music-synchronized art. Today, I am very lucky to interview Jade about her most recent line writer project, Mount Eerie. At a whopping 48 minutes of intricate full-color track making, Jade's track pushes line writer to some of its most fully realized heights of visual storytelling. It's really just an incredible track and an incredible work of art. If you haven't watched it already, I highly encourage you to go to Branches, her YouTube channel, and watch the freaking video. It's really great. Hi, Jade.
Hi, thank you. That's so kind.
Yeah. So we're going to just start off with sort of just some basic questions and we'll get into more detail.
Okay, great.
So in your own words, right, describe Mount Eerie. Talk a little bit about what you find maybe special or interesting about it.
Okay, so what is Mount Eerie?
Yeah, what is it?
It's a big question because we have, for people who don't know, we are a plural system of 2, maybe 3 now people, but during the process of making the track, we knew we were at least 2 people sharing a headspace, which is, we're plural, multiple people sharing a body and mind. And that means that we have because we're different people, we have different, connections to the track and different interpretations of what it is. And it kind of, to us, boils down to 3 layers of, what it is with, it's kind of like an iceberg meme, kind of. So, at the top layer of the iceberg, we have, Mount Eerie Line Rider is a musical visualization of the Microphones album, Mount Eerie, in a similar way to our other tracks, in that it's capturing, kind of our experience listening to music and how we visualize it, how the colors of it are and kind of the geometry of it. We experience music in a very geometric kind of way. It's oh, this beat is really squarey, or this one is really there's a lot of triangles here. But our track Ribs is very musical visualize-y,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe doesn't get into too much of a deeper story. But Mount Eerie is also that. It's also just capturing the listening experience of the album. On the kind of second layer, I kind of put it at the beginning, how in the text, if you have watched it, there is a land acknowledgement, which we might get into later. We'll see. I hope so. But basically, Mount Eerie is really, in this middle layer, it's about our connection to nature. Kind of the first kind of narrative about it. It's a, exploration into our connection to nature, and specifically giving nature a voice and recognizing that, the world is living, even though nature is it's a very static thing. Mammals are so motion pilled.
Mm-hmm.
We have to move around, and we're in order to be we're living, but the trees, the rocks, the earth, the grass, everything around us, bugs and shit, birds, bacteria, they're all alive, and they all have a voice, but we just don't really hear it most of the time because it's kind of it's kind of quiet. But to our ears, we want to experience sensory things. This is kind of a tangent, but
no, it's great though. Yeah.
But I think that's something about Line Rider specifically that's always kind of caught my eye, because we have Bosch like in the middle, who's like doing all this movement, but everything around her is so static, but it can also be so alive and like blooming, and like that's why we always like draw so many plants and stuff, because it captures life from a very nature perspective, like really giving nature a voice. And that's also something that's also connected to Phil's music, of course, because of Phil Elverum, who when making this album went by the name The Microphones, but after making this album realized that he wanted to change his name to Mount Eerie, because it kind of captured, he felt that the name Mount Eerie was like a good name for his entire music project, because it was like, he actually lives next to a mountain called Mount Eerie. It's spelled Erie, not the word Erie, but it's sort of like he lives next to this mountain, and he feels that the name is very reflective of the land that he lives on. And I relate to this a lot, because like Phil lives in Anacortes, Washington, which is maybe 2.5 hours away from me. I live in so-called Vancouver. We live in the Pacific Northwest on unceded Coast Salish land, and our experiences with thinking about nature and experiencing nature is really similar. And I relate to that a lot in Phil's music, just capturing landscapes in music, and also the idea that the landscapes around us have emotional qualities is like a really big part of this project. And that's kind of like, it's a huge fascination of his, and it's also a huge fascination of ours. Just the idea that, like, once again, the land is like breathing and alive, but also captures like emotions that we relate to. There's a part in like Phil's, I think it's his most recent album actually, Microphones in 2020, where he's reflecting on his voice as an artist. And there's a line that he says that is like thinking about his past and his childhood and the way that he was kind of raised in like a forest, and without like very much money. And he's like thinking about like, I think the line is like, was this like why I found it natural to speak with the voice of nature?
Yeah, that's a line.
Or the voice of weather, I think is actually what it was. Yeah, the voice of weather, that's what it was. Because then in our project, Mount Eerie, in Line Rider, there's kind of two halves to it. Like, in the first half, there's a character, and that character is the sun. There's Bosch in the middle, who is representing Phil, and like what Phil's going through, and she's obviously an important character. But I would say the two other really important characters to the piece are the sun and the big black cloud in the second half. And these characters are kind of, once again, they're alive. They're very important. And they too have emotions and intents and like ways that they react, ultimately kind of violently. In the wildfire part for the sun, and then also the off-sled bells inspired outburst in like at the peak of the mountain. And so at its second layer, what Mount Eerie is, it's an exploration of giving nature an emotional voice. And I don't know if it's my place to really do that. Like, I think I can kind of do that but it not completely. Like, I'm a human. I come from human experiences, but like, who knows what like nature is really feeling. But if we as people like start connecting more to the land that we are on, and like just because we're disconnected from nature more than we have ever been, And if we can rekindle that relationship, then maybe we'll like figure it out and get closer to like understanding that nature needs something from us and needs something from us to be reverted.
Yeah. And what's on that third layer?
The third layer. The third layer is the Cabby layer of on the deepest level, Mount Eerie is a queer self-discovery story. Specifically a transgender, like figuring out. It's kind of buried in the process of how Mount Eerie was made. We were figuring out that we were trans, like, while making this, and it was very much at the beginning of the project. It was like, okay, we're just gonna start using this new name, Jade. And then at the end of the project, like, as we were releasing it, we were, like, telling people in the world, like, hey, we're Jade now.
Yeah.
And also, the first place that I started using the name Jade was the Linewriter Artist Collective server. So it's very much a safe space for expression in that way, both artistically and in terms of, like, identity. Like, maybe we'll get into it later, but, like, if you are trans, you probably might get it.
You might relate.
It's like Mount Eerie is also an album about, like, the universe and, like, discovering how being in touch with not just nature, but like your size and how insignificant but also significant you are in the universe. And I've kind of twisted that to mean not just, oh, we're in a universe of, like, stars and galaxies, but it's also, like, within every person, there's an entire universe. And by being queer and, like, embracing that and figuring out who you really are, it doesn't necessarily have to be queerness, but for us it is. That you really do, like, open up this entire new universe, and that's, like, how the ending comes to be. But that's my answer to what Mount Eerie is. It's first, it's a musical visualization. Second, it's an exploration of our connection to nature. And third and deepest layer is a trans coming of age story. That's very abstract.
What a first answer. That's great. That was amazing. And so now that we have sort of a sense of the things that you've been thinking about with this track and sort of the artistic journey of Mount Eerie, I'm interested in also hearing about how you started making this track, right? What were the circumstances that sort of led you to start working on Mount Eerie, and, like, what were you thinking about when you started it, right? Because obviously, you know, you're at the end of this journey of this creating this monster track, right? But where were you at the start, right? You talked about that a little bit.
So at the start, I have to go back and, like, try and remember this, but it was in December 22nd was when the track was started. And I guess before that, I would say the first conception of figuring out this project was definitely, obviously, listening to the album. And we kind of, like, the first few listens of it were like, wow, this is really weird. Like, what is this? I like it. I really like the texture. I love the way it sounds, but, like, what's the story here? And trying to figure that out. It usually takes a few listens to figure that out in music for us, because we were pretty familiar with a lot of other Phil Elverum albums, like The Glow Part 2 and A Crow Looked at Me, which are really, like, have a lot of acclaim, but for, like, wow, they're so, like, emotional and like human experiences. But then this was something different. It was much more than just the human. It was, like, deeper than that. So yeah, we kind of been like, okay, this album's interesting. It's definitely something. I like the second song. It's, like, very cute. That was it. And then we had this one time that we listened to it, and that was very it was very visceral.
Mm.
I don't know. It was probably like a few months before we had actually started the Line Rider track. But basically, it was like we're listening to this album and we're like really focusing in on these drums. Right? It feels claustrophobic. It's like, oh, we're like rushing through these like corridors and we're really not sure what's happening. And then we're kind of in like a dark space, like listening to this. And then after like 10.5 minutes, it stops and the vocals start coming in, and
yeah,
it's
those first 10 minutes, and then just the cut to those vocals, right?
Yeah,
it's like
whoa.
Yeah.
But that was listening to that. It really does, and then like opening your eyes, and then suddenly you're on the shores of this really weird environment. It's like post-death. But it's like, oh, you're on like a death, like you have died, but you're not like finished dying yet. And you're like, maybe I can escape this if I climb this weird mountain that's in front of me. This is really menacing. And then you like look behind you and you're like, there's like ships and shit like coming in from all directions, and there's like all this smoke everywhere, and you're like, oh, this is bad, this is really bad. I gotta get up to this mountain because that's like the only place to run to from all these ships closing in. It's just very menacing and like gray and dark. So we're listening to this album and this is like what's going through our mind, and so we start kind of like, I might be like injured and like a few broken bones, and I gotta like get up this mountain. And then when the ships like come onto the shore, we're like hiding in this like bush. We're like, what's happening? And then like the fire starts. Basically, like at the shore, like this fire is starting, and it's starting to like burn this island down. Like this island's already like pretty dead, but there's a lot, there's life, there's trees and shit, but like this fire is just starting, and like the pirates are like, yes, we have this place surrounded, it's gonna all go down. And it's just like this fire is like surrounding, so we're like, oh, we gotta get up. And then the fire just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until we're kind of like halfway up the mountain. It's like, we're not really sure. Maybe the mountain hasn't even started yet, but we're like just getting in, like more inland.
Right.
Away from the shore, away from the more vulnerable spots to like flooding and shit.
And you're like imagining all this as you're sort of listening to the album.
Yeah. But like, it is like a dream almost, where it's like you are experiencing it through Phil's eyes. It's like, it's not like you're an observer like in Line Rider Mount Eerie. You're actually Bosch.
right
POV. And it's all very real world. It's not like 2D. It's like, oh, I turn my head from side to side, and there's this whole world. And then the second song, it's almost like you're like trying to catch your breath as you're like running away from this. And it's like you're just closing your eyes and you're remembering something. You're remembering something that happened before you supposedly died, I guess. Like, it might be like a random ass memory. Like in the case of Phil, he chooses to remember a memory about like a soccer player, like a really pretty soccer player in like Norway or something, like just juggling soccer balls. It's like one of the lines. But it's kind of, I guess there's two pieces that I'm thinking of. There's this short story that I read in English class, or like writing class, called Bullet to the Brain, where it's like someone gets shot and they die, but then in the process of dying, they suddenly remember this really random memory of like this kid, like with a funny accent. It's kind of dumb. But then the other art piece that comes to mind with like remembering like this last memory of like coherency before death is Everywhere at the End of Time.
Yeah.
And the final minutes of it, and how it's very like it's a representation of dementia the whole way through, but then at the very end there's this moment of coherency, and that's like, oh, I remember something, but then it ends right there.
Right.
And that's kind of what the second song felt like. And this is still all conceptualization. This is not
right.
like just, even starting the track and like making it.
You're just like listening to it, maybe looking at the, like hearing what Phil is singing, and you're just like thinking about all this.
Yeah. And basically from there, it kind of fades back into like reality. And we're like, okay, we're back on this mountain, and we can see the top. It's pretty close. And the smoke has kind of become like all encompassing. It's sort of a dome over this whole island. Like the entire base of this island has been like burned, but there's still like this peak to climb. And we don't know why we need to climb up, but there's something compelling there. Maybe someone told us to climb up the mountain. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we can escape death if we climb the mountain or something. Like, we go up there and we're at the top of this mountain. Or we almost get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the start of the fourth song, you're like on a boulder over alpine tops peaking. Like, that's what the line is. And then this sort of final climb moment is like this moment of like reaching up. And then seeing like some kind of light and like hoping that it's gonna like take you into like the right place, and you're not sure about it. And then it's very like, in my mind, it's similar to this one incredible episode of a podcast called Welcome to Night Vale.
Ah, yeah.
It's this like really kind of ghostly radio podcast where they're like broadcasting stories about this town in a desert. Mm-hmm. Where it's kind of normal, but then there's just so much happening. It's not normal. I'm not sure how I can describe it, but basically there's this one episode called A Story About You. It's just one story that's written in second person, and it's just like, you are now doing this, like you're doing everything in real time as the radio is broadcasting it. In this episode, you've kind of run away from your life. Like, you've run away from your old life to go to Night Vale, this desolate, weird town. And you're, like, haunted by how easy it was to escape your life, how easy it was to disappear. And you've been like, what the fuck? Like, I had a fiance, like, back in wherever. And then I just drove away. And it's, like, the most terrifying thing. But then in this town, you're just working, you're moving crates, but then at some point you choose to do something out of the ordinary. Like you steal a crate, which is you're not supposed to do.
Steal a crate? Oh no.
And eventually you get caught. Like you start driving out of town, and it's like really intense. But at the very end of the episode, it's like you're finally getting punished for what you've done. And these two guys come out of like a car and with your fiance, and then like,
oh my God.
And then they're like, your fiance is just like, why, over and over again. And then,
holy shit.
And then the radio host is like, you can never think of a time you have ever been happier, because like you're finally being punished for everything you've done wrong.
Oh my God.
And then like the two guys like come up to you and like press a knife against your throat, and that's how the episode ends.
Holy shit.
But that's all to say, basically throughout this episode, there's this recurring motif and imagery of this planet of awesome size with jagged mountain peaks and rich forests and like deep turbulent oceans, like just this terrifying monstrous planet like in the distance. And at the beginning of the episode, it's like so far away, it's like so intangible, like it's like it's so far. But then in the middle of the episode, it's like, oh, it's not even that far away now. Like you look up and you're like, oh shit, it got closer. And then at the end of the episode, like right as the knife is being pressed against your throat, you look up and it's there. And the final line of the episode is like, if you reached up hard enough, like you could almost touch it. And then it's like you reach up and then it cuts.
Oh my God.
So that's what the big black cloud will come get higher on your hill. When your fingers all go numb and you're finally standing still part like feels like it's like reaching up to this like really strange thing, like in your final moments of like being on this island, being alive, and then you just get fucking sucked into like something. And then the rest of the album is like a blur. I'm not sure really what happened after that. But yeah, that was that very visceral listening experience. And we were like, this would be dope to make in Line Rider.
Yeah.
Except I don't have the tools to do this.
And when would this have been? This would have been like...
This would have been maybe like it's like a few months before we started it. So like maybe September of 2021.
Wow. Yeah. You'd already had just a vision of it.
Yeah. So that was like the conceptualization, and we were like, man, we should like, and it always stuck with us. And like, we would never forget like this listening experience. And we were like, well, I want to express this in some way. And I'm like, the best way would probably be through Line Rider if like we were to do this whole album, like, but it's so dependent on color, and like we only have like black and white to work with, and we don't even have like camera controls or anything like that, or like we would need to make backgrounds of like just a bunch of gray to like make it work. And like, we can't do that. The only way we've done that is by copy pasting lines like over and over again until it's a full black thing. And then one night we were on a call together actually. And
yeah, Jade and I.
Yes. And I was like, hey, I want to learn how to do this. I think actually, yeah, the reason we weren't able to do it before was because our old computer that we made Line Rider tracks on, where the trackpad actually broke, which makes it impossible to make tracks. Like it broke after making Hold Yourself Tight. That computer was so shitty that it actually couldn't get the mods or anything like that. We had tried to, but it just didn't work. And then we're using a different computer. We were borrowing one from our parent. And we were just like, hey, maybe it would work on here. And it did. And we started making Mount Eerie that night. We made the first like 6 minutes. Like we started by making like a weird like orange and blue track, like just testing out the camera movements, camera pans, zoom outs, color layers, and even like multiple riders like switching perspective. But then we were like, okay, that's cool and all. Like, there's all these bright colors. But what if it's all gray? Like, this is what we use the color layers for. And that's how it began. And we just started making, like, the beginning of the album is just so stark. It really starts from nothing and then grows really gradually into something of life being like formed. And we just kind of started just going with it, not even really sure what it would be, but just like remembering like, oh, this feels important to make in some kind of way. And we weren't sure what it was gonna be. We definitely didn't know that it would end up being like about transitioning or about nature. But I mean, we knew that making that first rock section would definitely give us the space to just start thinking about the album. And we were like, this album is so interesting, and I want to learn more about it, and this is the best way to do that.
Yeah.
So that's how it began.
Yeah, this way of sort of making the track as a way to sort of understand the album is so cool, actually. Yeah. Yeah, the way art can help us sort of understand things in our life, right? And like why we feel the way we do, right?
For sure.
And this is maybe a good lead-in to this question, right?
Okay.
Because one of the kind of initially striking things about this track is that, as you're sort of talking about, its use of color, these shades of gray that are sometimes almost indistinguishable, right? Like this sort of thematic gray or monochrome environments, right? And then with this sort of contrast of these like really sort of like colors that are not monochrome, right? Even if you sort of really look at what colors they are, they're kind of muted, but in comparison to the gray, right, they're like vibrant, right?
For sure. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, how are you thinking about your use of color in Mount Eerie aesthetically and narratively, right? Because
it's a big part of the piece. Yeah,
it's huge.
It definitely wasn't a thing I knew from the start that it was gonna get really bright later. Like, I guess when making the start, we were just focused on the start and like how the starting was going to look. But as we were making the starting and calling in the Line Writer Artists Collective Discord, there's one system of people who we credit at the end of the track. Chicken is their name, and we say that they inspired most of the narrative choices related to color, because the story that they shared that really inspired us to restrain ourselves with color in the first moments and then like really let it all out in like certain moments, like that felt really key, were like based off of this story that Chicken told us, where I don't remember all the details like exactly, but the gist of it was that they were in like this cave for like a really long time. Like they're like exploring this cave and like not really sure like the way out. I think I could be remembering this totally wrong, but
I was there for this. I think it was a tunnel that they were going through.
Oh, okay, yeah, kind of it was a tunnel,
enclosed rocks.
Yeah. And it was just like super dark and like couldn't really see that much, and your eyes just have to get like really like. After being in the dark for so long, you kind of just have to start making out the shapes of like what is there. Even if like as you were just entering, it seems indistinguishable. Your eyes will start to like make it out and like tell these very slightly different shades of gray apart in the case of Mount Eerie. But basically, when they finally emerged out of the tunnel, like they look up and the universe is there. Like the sky is absolutely covered in stars, like so naturally, because there's no like light pollution from the city in this place. And it's just like the most beautiful thing that they had ever seen.
Yeah.
Not just the place, but because their eyes like hadn't seen light for so long. And then it was so like gratifying when it finally happened. And we were like, as we were hearing this story, we were like, this is what's gonna like guide the color usage, because it's very held back at the beginning, and then the first traces of color actually come in the river section, like 9 minutes in, which is this blue, and it kind of catches you off guard. Not too much, it's not jarring, but it's just like, ooh, there's this blue layer. And then the next color that gets introduced is just the yellow sun and the fire, and then that culminates. It builds and builds until there's more and more of that on screen, until the 17-minute mark there's like static all over the screen, and it's like the whole island has burned down, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the second song, The Memory, thinking back, is really a moment of all these very soft colors coming into play. And it was, we kind of like, while we were making the first part, like with all the gray, we were like, okay, we should probably make like one like really colorful track. So we made Don't Worry in a Night, which is another track. It's our first released color track.
You were working on this before Don't Worry, right?
Yeah, we started this before that. Don't Worry was made on New Year's Eve. That's how I spent my New Year's.
Great use of time.
Yeah. It was. Wholeheartedly. But yeah, that definitely inspired the color sections in the solar system part. And then, but then the off sled part is like very distinct because it's like, it's this incredibly blinding moment, especially if you've like turned on your brightness on your screen like all the way up. And then it's like, oh, I actually like died because my eyes just died. And that's like, oh, that's great. I think Pac would say that a lot. Like, I've been murdered by this track. And I'm like, good, that's exactly how you should feel. But yeah, like, basically even looking at gray and almost black backgrounds for most of the track. And then suddenly you're thrust into an environment that's just black and white. And the thing about this part is it's like exactly what 99%, in terms of color, it's what 99% of Line Rider tracks look like.
Yeah.
But because it's like in context with all this like this grayness, and you're like, oh, this is normal now. What used to be normal now looks incredibly surreal and like wrong. And it's great. It's very raw and fun. And then after that, there's like this yellow background. And I wasn't sure about this part when we are on the other side of the mountain and we're kind of coming down, or like just an almost dead body to like just fall, just being like streamed down the side of the mountain like with no will. The yellow, the like kind of pale like tan color was a really interesting choice that came later. It came a lot later than other things. We thought it would be more gray actually at the beginning, but it felt right to make it like this, almost like the sun has like come out. That like the sun has risen again. And it's like, hooray, we're dead. I don't know if it's triumphant, but maybe a little bit. It's interesting. I don't know how to describe it yet. But there's one more thing to mention, and it's the use of the color black specifically. And also white, I guess. Because the first instant of black in the whole track is the big black clouds. On the mountain. And that feels really good every time I watch it, because it's like, you know, we're kind of exploring like almost black territory, but then this is like completely black, and you're like, oh yeah. Like, that's menacing. Actually, that's not the first instance of black. The first instance of black is actually in the solar system section, in like a very tiny drawing of Mount Erie.
Oh.
But that's like a very subtle foreshadowing thing. Anyways, lore.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
But yeah, the use of color black is really important. And then also, of course, in the final song, it just cuts to a completely black screen. And that's a really significant moment, especially in the lyrics as well. Like, the lines are like, now that I've disappeared, I have my sight. Beautiful black, you are unveiled.
Yeah.
And then we have like pure just white stars on black background. And it was really, I mean, I don't know what would happen if Chicken never shared that story. I mean, maybe we would have come to the same conclusion that we were like, we need to like really hold back and then like throw our punches at these specific moments to make them really work. But I mean, that story was like so crucial to how the track played out, which it made me really glad that I made this track not like in secret.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of really good contributions by people just like giving feedback, or not giving feedback, but like even just like giving their response and like maybe just thinking about it in voice call and like giving me something to work off of. And I'm like, yes. Like Gavin making a rush of blood to the head completely in secret was just unhinged. Like, I mean, it worked for him. It's great. And he needs that space, but we need, art is very social for us.
Totally. Yeah. I definitely feel like there's at least one moment that would not have existed without that story from Chicken, with the long tail grind and looking up at the stars. That moment would not have happened without that story, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. great tactic to like be like, my goal is to blind my audience. It's no joke. Great tactic for the emotional effect.
I mean, I come from the Geometry Dash community, you know?
Right.
Like,
They're just like firing sensitivity warnings at you all the time.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I'll just throw one, like, at this really big moment. And that'll show them.
Yeah. Maybe sort of another question to sort of get at is, because you've been talking a lot about nature, right? Things like the land acknowledgement and that text at the start, right? Where you're sort of talking about it's like dedicated to nature, and her, you use the she, her pronouns for nature,
it's Mother Nature. I've always learned that. Yeah.
I think it also ties into some other things, right? With like the bottom layer, quote unquote, with the gender, right? Mm-hmm. And it also opens with this quote from Phil Elverum, right? It doesn't necessarily feel like nature wants us in it, right?
Yes.
And nature is such an important theme in the track and elsewhere in your work, right? There's nature all the time in your tracks, right? So what is your own relationship to nature, and how does that relationship appear in your tracks? How is that like relation with nature, right? How is that functioning in this track?
I think it's... Well, I mentioned before that the piece and Phil's music is very reflective of the land that we live on, like specifically the Pacific Northwest and Coast Salish land, like how that feels to live with. Like, this track would be completely different if it weren't for the fact that, like, I wake up every morning and I fucking see mountains, like, right? The city I live in, Vancouver, it's really, I mean, it's pretty urbanized, but there's a lot of traces of nature everywhere that is really strong. And also, like, something that's really important about the land acknowledgement is, like, a big reason why we do it is just, like, the piece is so, like, Mount Erie is so dictated by where I'm from, and it would not be the same if the people who lived here for thousands of years before the land was like colonized and abused, if they didn't like take proper care of it, of our land. And like indigenous culture is like, it's kind of like a blueprint for how we should live with the land, because like they have thousands of years of being here without fucking it up and like exploiting everything and like being communal and also being like, two-spirited people. Yeah, this is an important part of society. Like people, a third or fourth gender is like very important. Yeah. So with my personal relationship to nature, aside from like indigenous inspiration, it's also like our channel name is Branches. That's that for a reason. And like one of us is named Twig because I guess the name Twig actually comes from this one outdoor school trip that we went to, like a camping trip in grade 7, where no one used their real names, like with the counselors or with each other. They used nature names. Oh. So, like, my friend was Pebbles, and this other person was... Okay, Pebbles is a horrible first example, but this other person was like... Okay, yeah, it's great, you're right. But, like, other people were like Hemlock or, like, Cypress, which are names of trees, and, like, one of the counselors was named... Alpenglow, which is fucking based. But like our name was Twig, and that's how that, I guess everyone else kind of threw out their names, but
you held on to it.
Yeah. That one stayed. And then we kind of always think of ourselves as like this like tree that is continuing to grow, and like our whole system is kind of like branches of a tree, but then Twig is like the sticks of the tree, and then like Cabby is very much like the flowers, and this other person who's kind of being discovered is kind of the leaves of it. This other person. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's sort of our connection to nature. It's very much like, to sum it up in a really simple way, nature is not something we live beside or live with. It's very much that we are actively a part of nature. Like, we are nature. And a lot of humans are like, no, we can't recognize this, but we gotta. Land is not something we live on. We live with, and we are part of the land ourselves as part of the ecosystem and the habitats and the biomes and shit. It's just we distance ourselves a lot, and it's sad. It is sad.
And that identification with nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems that it is really informing a lot about Mount Erie. Yeah. and maybe this sort of, talking about like identity, that might be a good way to sort of lead into these, like, that third layer you were talking about.
Yeah.
About how, things like gender, things like queerness, right? Identity, right? And a friend of ours described Mount Erie as like a creation myth that's also a coming of age story.
Yeah.
which is incredible description, right? And it's specifically a queer coming of age story, right? And a trans coming of age story. And it ends up being so important. It runs through the track in like sometimes like subtle ways, but really, really important ones, right? You've mentioned it in this interview. You've mentioned it in the description of Mount Erie. Yeah. How is this track relating to your sort of own self-discovery, self-expression, coming of age?
Yeah, it's tricky to get into, but we'll try our best.
Understandable.
I would say, okay, yeah. I mentioned how Mount Erie is like kind of split into two halves, where the sun is like the center of the first half. It's like this very important figure, this character. And then the second half is like the clouds. There's so many clouds. And that's like, obviously, yeah, it's related to nature and like the fires and like smoke and all this expression of nature. But they're also, as we mentioned, it's related to queerness in that I would say the first half of the track is kind of a realization inside yourself that, oh, I am queer, I am trans. It's like starting to figure that out yourself. And then the second half is really like what happens when you tell people this and what happens in the process of embracing this and having this knowledge now. So like first half, gaining knowledge of being trans, and then second half is embracing that. Because the sun is like, to us in Mount Erie, we interpret the sun that they are like this really influential person that is like, they're so influential that they like, like you orbit around them. And like a bunch of things orbit around them, and they're like beautiful and massive and writhing, and like in the first moment of the sun being revealed, where you look up and the sun is like right there. It's like, right? Like the planet of awesome size, like that thing again.
Yeah.
From the Night Vale episode. But it's just like being faced with this incredibly like beautiful and important and like central person, I guess. Like we all have someone who is like the sun to us. Like we wouldn't really live without them. Like the sun is like what makes life possible on Earth. Like it's the photosynthesis shit. Some scientific stuff. I'm not good at science, but like that light and like having that that's how life began and like how it continues and how it evolves. But it's also has the power to like destroy. It's very powerful. It's much more powerful than anyone on Earth. We're kind of powerless. Like even the most powerful people are like, yes, I have power. Like the sun, no, she's fucking writhing. Like she will kill you. So that's how that feels. It's basically like the sun character could be a friend. It could be like a family member who's like really important, or a mentor who's really inspiring and like really pushes you forward. Just someone who's important to you and is like, wow, it feels like a lot kind of revolves around them. And in the case of Phil, he is consistently using the sun as like someone he's in a relationship with. And that, we haven't mentioned this yet, but yeah, the track that we made in 2020, You Are the Sunset, is very much about like personifying the sun, but like basically being like that this person is so important that, yeah, they are the sun. But also in this case, it's you're the sunset because it's temporary, but also it's so beautiful, right? And that's sort of what captures it a lot. But it's in the lyrics of Mount Eerie itself. It's very interesting, like listening to Mount Eerie made in 2003 and then also listening to A Crow Looked at Me in 2017, like 14 years apart, and how he's kind of like in Mount Eerie, he's talking about like death and like how, I didn't even mention like the quote at the beginning of Mount Eerie, that how nature doesn't necessarily want us here. That's from an interview that he did about the making of Mount Eerie. Kind of similar to what we're doing now, but where he's talking about like driving in like Florida, and it's like just nature feels incredibly menacing. Like it's hot and humid, and it's like the air is thick, and also it's right after like 9/11. Like there's all these little flags everywhere, and it's just like, it's like everything around you just feels like hostile, and like it's just like nature doesn't want you there necessarily. It doesn't want humans to do whatever they're doing here. It doesn't want this. It's gonna react like she's gonna like just burn everything up, and she's gonna set the whole place just like, no, get out of here, humans. You're killing me. And I think he also mentions in that interview that basically just driving in that instance, the prospect of like upcoming death becomes not an abstract thing anymore. It's very much like in The Glow Part 2 and in like his older work, it's like, yeah, death, it's like this fucking thing, I guess. It's like abstract and kind of spiritual. But then as he kind of progresses in his career, he's realizing that mortality is really, it just becomes more real each time. And that really gets to A Crow Looked at Me, where his wife like withers away in front of his eyes, like goes from alive to dead.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah. I can't really describe that. Like his music can't even describe it either. It's just so, I can't really put words to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was I talking about? I was talking about the sun.
You were talking about the sun, yeah.
And how
the immensity of death stopped us in our tracks a little bit.
How typical of death to do that. It's based, but
the sun is representing like a person.
Yes, because in Mount Eerie, the album, like he keeps, like he's saying things like "see me," like look unveiled, or wait, that's in the part after, but like see me, like look from side to side, see me like struggle and crawl, but then it's like like I'm done with this, like I'm so dead, like I'm but then it's like, but I feel you on my neck, you are a ball of fire.
Right.
And then that's like this huge moment of just like, oh my god. Like the sun is there, and it's like, Bosch is really like staring right at the sun at that part. Like,
Yeah.
But in that instance of like driving in Florida, he was like, had just kind of parted ways with someone that he was like very intertwined with, in his own words. And it was kind of like in the sun, like you can feel that person there. And that's sort of Phil's meaning of the sun in his work. But for us, it's like similar, but it's also like, I'm going to use Ethan's words, Ethan Lee's words in their My Boy review, in which they say, a budding queer crush. And obviously, like, yeah, I'm a 17-year-old. I'm not dying, but I am filled with like queer emotions. In our queer like discovery, like it's always certain people, right, that like kind of cause you to question yourself and are like, oh my god, this person's like hot. In like the sense that like the sun is hot. Okay, that's a really funny interpretation, but like
no, it's incredible.
It got very serious to very silly very quickly, but hey, death is a silly thing sometimes as well. And yeah, the solar system part is like the sun is like causing all these like plants to grow and like all this like lush nature to become possible. And it's like, whoa, what's happening to me? Like, I'm gay? It's very funny how I've like taken this pretty straight album and turned it into something so homoerotic, but like that's just, it's naturally a result of making an album that is so connected to nature, because environmentalism and queerness are interlocked, and I can't really describe why, but I know they are.
No, true. There's a lot of thinking on this. Yeah, it's a very good intuition.
Like, there's so many queer people in the like climate movement here in Vancouver, so it's like, I wonder why. And it definitely has to do with like being marginalized in some ways. I can't really put words to it, but it's there, that connection. Yeah, nature's just gay, basically.
True though. And trans.
It is, yeah, and trans, of course. It is blooming and beautiful, and yeah. And then the second half, right? That's sort of like the knowledge of like, or the first half is like the knowledge of getting like, oh, I am trans. I'm something, right? I'm not straight. I'm definitely not straight. And then the second half is like, okay, well, I'm unveiled now. I look unveiled as I walk out of the canyon, and now I have to climb this mountain. And the mountain is like the journey of like self-acceptance and also telling others and seeing what happens from that, because that can open up a lot of can of worms.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, like climbing up this mountain is like really the courage to like to come out, basically. To become in touch with who you really are, and you know that it is worth it, and you have to do it, and you have to climb this mountain. You have to, like, there's just no other way. Otherwise, you'll just die on this burning island. But then you climb up and you go up, and at the top of the mountain, there's like, it's like, I have to be honest here and be like, I'm not really sure. It's kind of both. Like the big black cloud off-sled, maniacal, unhinged scribbling. You could read it as a like really like cute celebration and also like just life destroying, like traumatic outcomes. And it's kind of like you don't really know what people are going to be like and how people are going to respond to, like, are they going to accept you for who you are? And like, who do you keep in your life like after this?
Yeah.
So yeah, this moment is like, I mean, you go off sled and it's basic, like there are lyrics like, I'll strike you down and then I'll strike you down again. And it's very violent and it's also fun.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's both, right? Like, I don't, like, it's kind of just a huge thing. It's like, being out is like, suddenly you're like exposed in this really weird way that's kind of wonderful and also like horrible, but also wonderful. So it's a very upbeat part of the track. It's very exciting and it's very, like I mentioned that in the description, like how life-threatening this moment is and how real it is. And that sort of like your whole world changes at that time. Also, oh my god, the clouds in this part are very like, they have cute faces and stuff, and they're also very like evil faces. Like it's very like, a lot of people compared it to We Don't Want to Die, which by Def Tab, which is an interesting comparison. I didn't like originally intend that, but it's definitely there where it's like dealing with like death in like a really silly way, and it's like, yeah, we can do this. But then the ending of this cloud sequence is really significant because the clouds sort of break down themselves like after this fit of anger, and they kind of like have this moment as this part of this song is like dying out. They are like dwindling themselves and like
crying.
Yeah, they're crying. And it's, I guess it could be like, I'm once again, I'm not sure how to interpret that exactly. It could be like people realizing like, oh, I've hurt someone really badly, like with this. And it could also be like, I understand you.
Right, yeah.
That part just captures a lot.
It does, yeah.
For me personally.
And then you're after this moment of death, and then the track keeps going, right?
Yeah.
Into really interesting spaces with this sort of narrative.
So at the part where we're like falling down the mountain and we're eaten by vultures, which by the way is very gay.
True.
It's very gay to be eaten, your corpse to be eaten by birds, but there is also, oh gosh, I'm not sure how this relates to queerness, but I will mention it as well because it's a significant moment to me personally that I have trouble articulating, but it's the rain at the bottom of the mountain, like when the static comes back, the static in the music. And it's something about the way that these clouds have been like villainized the entire time throughout this track, like as like their first instance, they're like appearing as like smoke from the pirate ship. They have like these fiery eyes inside them, and they're like really violent in the off-sled section. But then what does it actually lead up to? Like, what were the clouds just going to do the whole time? They were just going to rain. And it's like, what was so scary about that, right?
Yeah.
It's this interesting, like, almost like an anticlimax moment where it's like, oh, the clouds like letting loose there when they start crying, like in the very animated section. Animated in the sense that they're like anime, not like animated, but when they start crying, it's like, oh, that's just like rain forming, and that's like also so important for life to continue. Not just the sun, but the water. Water is life, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's more nature related, but maybe it's also connected to queerness in a way that I haven't really figured out personally.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way coming out is also like in the end, it's this weird anticlimax as well.
Yeah,
right. like especially if everyone just is like, yeah, cool, right? It's like, what the fuck, Because you're like expecting like everyone to hate you or something, right? You're preparing for the worst mentally.
Yeah.
And then unless you're very unlucky, it's never the worst, right?
Yeah. It's just like, oh, cool. Okay, I'll start using your pronouns. And you're like, but you're a boomer. This is so confusing. Yeah, and they're just like a dead body, like exhausted at the bottom. Or like not a dead body, but like you're just like lying down in this rainstorm. But then the ending. You've not mentioned the ending and how that is probably the most upfront queer part of the track. Because it's after you've like disappeared, you have your sight, you can see clearly, like you've gotten rid of this old self. It's very like, because being trans is like really like, I mean, I don't want to say it's like killing yourself, but it's really like killing a past self. Like,
yeah, there's a reason why it's called a dead name,
You're right. But in this moment, the stars that were in the long ass tail grind section that match the colors of Bosch, they make return in full form and start like covering the screen in just red, green, and blue. Like Bosch is just becoming part of the universe in this very gradual formation of stars until the stars arrange themselves directly into Bosch's scarf. And Bosch sees her face like in the night sky and in the universe. And that is a really important part because I don't know if I can explain it well, but I mean, I remember in the review that you're writing about the track, you mentioned like this part is like, it's seeing like your face for like truly your face, like really recognizing yourself in the mirror and being like, this is me. Like, I'm actually here. And like, that's something so special. Like you specifically mentioned like after years of HRT and like really finally being in touch with yourself. And finally at that moment, like after we see ourselves for who we really are, an entirely new universe like opens up. It has things from like what we've previously known, but it's also this incredible blooming of so many new possibilities and just the vastness of what can really happen now that I mean,
it's just zooming out and out and out after that moment. It's just like, it's just so much.
Yeah.
It's like immense.
I feel like it's important to note that like this part is very inspired by Freaks by Visible. In that the stuff in this part is really just like us doodling. Like it's very, it feels like almost pretentious to put that in like the context of like an entire universe of like just doodles, but it's kind of true because within ourselves and within everyone, within you listening to this right now, it's like there's so much within you that is possible. There's so much in you already, but like you can open up all these possibilities. And I haven't like figured it all out myself, of course. We spend our entire lives trying to figure this out, like this eternal question of who the fuck are we? But it's something we're progressing on, even if it's kind of infinite. it's countably infinite. We can keep counting up and keep keep seeing more of the infinity, I guess, instead of just a little recluse like, oh, I have to be I'll say it like a straight narrow path, right? Like really straight.
Yeah.
But like being gay is just like, oh my gosh, there's so much all around me, and it really is like opening up a personal new universe, just like birthing a supernova of just like transness. So yeah.
Amazing.
That's why Mount Erie's gay. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is like a good lead in to sort of a slightly more technical question.
Mm-hmm.
Scale is such a huge element of Mount Erie.
Yeah.
Like the immense inhuman size of reality is just like is such an like it's just like a theme all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all these sorts of zoom outs, right? To like the sun is immense. This text, what do you want? It's just like massive, right? And then that ending, right, where it's just zooming out, and out, and it just keeps zooming out past the point that you think it like, okay, well, it can't keep zooming out. It keeps going until it like the whole universe like disappears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did you think about space and scale while you're making this, right? Because it's so different from what we see in so many other Line Rider tracks.
It's, once again, very rooted in Phil's music, where it's like Phil is very much like thinking about his size in the universe and really trying to figure that out. And also like the recurring point in Phil's music about like there not being ends or boundaries or any like borders between things. It's all just imagined in our minds. It really is like just a bunch of atoms existing. And we're like, oh yeah, this is a chair, this is a flower. But yeah, with the zoom outs, how I guess I figured that out. I mean, we had never done any kind of zooming or any panning like that before. And it was also just like kind of distancing ourselves from just us being in the mindset of just making a Line Rider track. It's really like, oh, I really want to take this experience of like that one listening experience that we had. And like, this is just a medium that I feel comfortable conveying this in, and I think would be able to convey it well because we have like a person who is moving through a physical and somewhat introspective landscape. And that ended up coming together really naturally. But for the zoom outs, I'm like stalling because I can't think of like exactly how I came up with it. I guess it was just experimentation, right? Just like playing around. There's no zooming or any kind of panning except for like maybe one like very gradual zoom in and then zoom out in the first 12 minutes. Like nothing like that happens. And then I guess the first moment of that, yeah, it's the sun in the sky. And this was not going to be as huge of a moment originally. Or like, we had originally drawn the second sun, like the second you are a ball of fire moment, which is a much smaller sun. First, we had drawn it in that first location. And then you, Ava, were like, maybe put that in the second spot and then make this one like this big sun. And then we were like, how do we do that? And then I guess like tinkering around with that was like, oh, like the immensity of scale is like really just something that's extremely important to embrace in this. And then also the what do you want moment. I mean, it's such a...
It feels like so distinct from everything else.
I mean, it's a moment of many things happening here. There's, in this what do you want, we're being faced with future. And like, I don't know, we've been asking ourselves this question a lot. Like, especially with where we're at right now with just like transitioning gender wise, and then also like from like childhood to adulthood, which Phil was also dealing with when making the album. He described it as like the album kind of represents like a mark between like between like childhood and adulthood. And just the immensity of like that "what do you want" moment is so grand and like menacing, like this huge landscape of just like, so much possibility. And it felt right to put it as text as well in the mountains, as like this jagged, almost carved out text. And that's also plays into giving nature a voice, and also something that I paid really close attention to because it's extremely important in the album is the voices and who is voicing what. Because Phil is always Phil. Like, Phil is always playing himself. He's not playing any of the other characters in nature, or like the sun or the clouds or anything. Like, he is always Bosch in this case. And like, all of his lyrics are always, up until we get to like almost the top of the mountain, his lyrics are always reflected in Bosch's movements. But the first thing that gets said by another voice is "I know you're out there" in the second song, where there are like these, I guess, they're female vocals like coming in, like water rushing in, like this kind of ghostly voice of like longing. And that's the first text that also gets written in Mount Eerie that's like lyrics, because I want everyone else's voices, not Phil's, but everyone else's, to be reflected in the track itself, in nature, the staticness of everything else, but show that it is also living. And that is part of the "what do you want" moment, was that the first introduction of that voice. Like, I don't know who the vocalist is at that part. I should really know his name, because it's amazing. And then the zoom out at the very end. You might notice that in the ending credits, there's an inspiration listed. It's very peculiar. It's "Cats and Pumpkins" by Rabid Squirrel. And in this track, it's like, if you haven't seen it, it's just like a Rabid Junk release where it's like a monthly Patreon exclusive suggested track, where it's just like, it's a Halloween themed track, and there's like cats being combined with pumpkins, and Bosch is like riding on them. It's very simple. But then at the end, when the track ends, it zooms out, and basically the entire like track that you've seen is encompassed in this very small space within this giant cat's eye. And it's basically just a gimmick. In this case, it's like, whoa, look how far we can zoom out, cool. But we were like, that's so interesting to have this like entire universe be reflected in someone's eye. Like, and it's also like very Shiver sequence, like kind of ending, where it's like the entire, like all this writhing possibility is just like within the mind of Bosch. And that was like important to the ending, and being like, what if we just see the entire universe become like nothing? And that's like very connected to the themes of like people dying, and how there are universes like inside of us, and how those universes too are not lasting. And that zoom out at the end, it was kind of accidental. Well, basically what I did is, when I was making the sun zoom out, I didn't know like how to do the code properly. So I put in like zoom out level, -1000. And then I crashed Line Rider. But before doing so, I basically watched like everything that I had made so far, which was like 17 minutes, zoom out into nothingness. And I was like, I think I just watched the universe happen in reverse. Like, and I was like, that's the ending. I'm not gonna tell anyone, but that is the ending. That's how this track ends. And hopefully it doesn't crash the export. So the actual zoom level at the very end of the track is -150.
Which is wild, because the zoom code is like exponential.
Yeah.
So each number is exponentially more.
You can tell we know what we're doing with like technical things. Definitely. This track is very technically advanced. It's not.
So you're talking about like the technical aspects of Line Rider, and you've been mentioning several tracks or interview. In many ways, Mount Eerie really feels like this a love letter to Line Rider and Line Rider art. I think the credits are sort of emblematic of this for me, right? You take this time to draw like a little personal representation of each of your influences. You don't like list them in the description, you like give them a picture, which is like such a kind thing to do. That's the only way I can like think of it. And how do you think this track really fits into Line Rider as a whole?
It's interesting to think about because I didn't intend for this track to be like a track for Line Rider creators, right? Like they can definitely enjoy it, but it's more of just like a musical experience and like a more broad thing. But for the credits, obviously, like when we're doing stuff in Line Rider, we're gonna take inspiration from other tracks because it's important. Like if you've seen stuff done well in other tracks, or even like not done that well, but you want to expand on that original idea, like you're gonna take inspiration from like lots of different places. And that ended up happening in Mount Eerie, of course. This Will Destroy You has, the first Line Rider feature film has like this really long credits sequence of just like listing a track that inspired it and then like giving like a reason for how it inspired it, like for showing that like this technique can be really expressive in this circumstance, like really explaining that word for word. And I wanted to do something similar, but I couldn't really do that. I can't describe it. I mean, I kind of can. Like I could give Shortcuts by Banky as an inspiration and be like, this track is an inspiration because it shows like the musicality of nature. Like it's one of the first tracks to really embrace how like nature can be like a way of showing how music flows. But I thought it would just be more fitting and also weirdly easier for me to do like a credit sequence in Line Rider rather than like actually editing it. I know it's unhinged that I'm probably better at making a credit sequence instead of just like putting text on like a movie maker app, but also like it's so much more fun to do. So that was kind of what inspired the credits part, because we were like, I want to show like what aspect of this track it's like really vital to it, but I don't want to write it out. But within like the world of Line Rider, like how it fits into that, I'm not sure. Like I didn't really think that this track would be like that enjoyed. I don't know. Like I thought maybe like 2 people would like it. And I would be like, yeah, it's okay. I'm making like this really weird, unconventional thing, and that's fine. Like I'm okay with that. But a lot of people have really loved it. Some people have called it like the best Line Rider track, which is the weirdest fucking thing. But I'm excited to see if Mount Eerie shapes more tracks going forwards, and especially in like uses of color and how that will go forwards and how color can be used more narratively. I mean, My Boy did that first, I would say. That's also why that's listed as an inspiration. But
yeah, but you really took that to like a whole different level. In my opinion, in my opinion.
Most of the inspirations that are listed there are mostly like, this technique was used really well and I took it and kind of made it my own to fit with the story. But the main like really big inspirations for like the whole narrative of the track are like, Shortcuts is one of them by Banky, because nature music, very good. It's my favorite track. I could get really into it, but I won't right now. But Descenso del Monte Las Estrellas by El Loco Invisible is really, really significant because it literally is an eerie mountain. Like, and it's very like, just the landscape of it is so like, it really like is one of the first tracks I've seen to depict nature in like this really emotional way, and that's really raw and reflects feelings of nature. And we wanted to take that even further. And also it just lets time exist. Like it doesn't rush through anything. It just shows this experience in a really raw, unfiltered way. It's fucking filmed the screen instead of like a normal export. It's so good. And also just like the movement of Descenso is so... The way Bosch traverses through this environment, it's not like precisely synced to anything. It's just... Or like technically impressive or anything. It's just how Bosch just like naturally like follows like these... It feels like undetermined, like the path forward is really nice. Another big inspiration was Cold Death at the beginning. Cold Death by Visible. I think you remember at the beginning of making the track, I like joked around like, I'm making Cold Death colorized was what I said at the beginning. I mean, I love Cold Death. It's a really interesting piece. I should probably watch it again. I haven't watched it in ages.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch.
Yeah,
there's something weird with YouTube going on with it. Yeah, unfortunately. But also just viscerally hard to watch well.
But just like going to this destination of like having to go there to like die. And also not reaching the destination, like dying before it. Like... before you actually get to there. Like in Mount Eerie, there's kind of the recurring mountain like appears a lot, especially in the dream sequence in Solar System, the second song. And I always put like these hearts on top of Mount Eerie. It's kind of a Gavin Roux like inspired thing where it's like you kind of internalize the idea of just like putting like this personal motif that might not make any sense to anyone, but you know, you commit to it. Gavin like uses like two trees to like be like some kind of place and environment, and I will put a bench in all my tracks. I don't care if it doesn't make sense, but it's just part of like the personal aspects of it. So that led into A Rush of Blood to the Head being an inspiration, but that was definitely a thing where I was like, okay, A Rush of Blood to the Head exists. Like someone else has made like this really long form track. Like I feel like I can definitely do this too. And I've also made like a 28-minute track beforehand. I mean, it's not the best, but it took a long time. It took like a year to make. Like when starting Mount Eerie, I thought the project would take a year. Like I was ready to like spend a really long time with it, and then it took 3.5 months, which is super short. wild that you made it that quickly. Yeah, but A Rush of Blood to the Head coming out made it feel like, oh, this is very possible for me to do, and I wanted to find a balance in the storytelling between the level of detail in This Will Destroy You and A Rush of Blood to the Head, because This Will Destroy You is like stark minimalism the entire time. It's just the most bare bones a track can possibly be, which is great. It works super well for This Will Destroy You. There's no physical world-like narrative being conveyed in This Will Destroy You. It's more emotional and introspective, which I wanted to see if I could do both. And then Gavin's also kind of has physical locations, and it also has, it's mostly introspective as well, but it's full of detail. It's a 54-minute film, and like there are moments where like you will blink and you will miss like important stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome, but like how can I find a balance between these two really like extreme things? And the idea of like an album track is like, it always kind of circulates around in the community, like, what album would I make an album track to if I had anything? Like, maybe this album, because I like all the songs. And then you're like, whoa, this would actually burn me out so badly. So I was like really surprised how fast Mount Eerie went, but it also makes sense because it's just such a connected piece of work, the album. Like it's 5 songs, it's 5 movements, but they're really connected together in a way that's not just, it's cohesive, it's one story. It's one continuous thing that I really felt a need to show more clearly, because it's a great lesson, but I wanted to share our interpretation of it and also just show that there doesn't have to be like distinct parts. Like in the 2 other album tracks, there's a lot of distinction between each section, each part. In A Rush of Blood to the Head, there's text saying like, part 7, this song. And it's like, there's this 10-second gap between each of the parts, which really makes them feel separate. There's none of that in Mount Eerie, and that's all thanks to the way that Phil thought about how the music would be made. Like, it's really a story. And yeah, I don't know if more people are gonna make really long ass tracks.
It's wild that we've gotten like 2 in such a short span of time.
I'm kind of hoping that that's not the direction that it goes into, because making really big projects for the sake of making a really big project is never a good idea, I think. Or like, maybe it could be if you're like trying to work on like your technique or like, I don't know, some kind of, but personally, I can't justify it really. Like in Mount Eerie, it was, I have this story that I feel the need to convey just the same as any other track that we've made, like Pink in the Night or Something Just Like This or Buddhas in Paradise or any of them. It's the same. Like, I want to communicate something, but just in this track, I just need a lot more time to do that. And
it just happens to be a 45-minute story.
It just happens to be, right? But it's the perfect length. It conveys everything that needs to be conveyed for me in like the right way. And I guess also having that confidence throughout the track that like this really feels like something natural to me. And this natural process is something that made it so seamless. And it's hard to find those projects that really click for you with line writer artists and just artists in general. But finding which stories you want to convey and which ones that matter to you, and like also just finding like a good routine on like how to work on it is like, I hope more line writer artists can like find that for themselves, because I think that makes the world of art a lot more interesting and beautiful.
Yeah. How do you feel about this track now that it's out in the world? How do you make sense of it as a piece of art you've actually made and like finish and is like something people are like watching and talking about and all this shit?
It's very weird to like say like, oh yeah, I made Mount Eerie, like past tense, because I mean, it feels like the creation of it is still ongoing. Like, I mean, it's just like our life. Right. Like life goes on, but now this thing is like my writing teacher. This writing teacher was pretty important. But he said like, no art piece is ever like truly finished. We just choose to stop working on it at some point. And that's kind of how it was with Mount Eerie. I was kind of, I was like, I could keep going, but I mean, there's no more album left, so I will keep it here. And I'm mostly looking forwards now to the future, like being an adult, I guess.
Yeah.
And also being out as a woman. Oh my god. Yay.
Yeah. And that's a perfect lead-in to our final question.
Okay.
What do you hope for from the future? Both in terms of line writer, but also in terms of your life and the world. Brutal question, I know.
Brutal question. What do you want? This is the question of the track. I guess I'll start with line writer. In the world of line writer and in the world of art making, I don't know. Line writer's always been like this. Like, we make art in other mediums as well, like we mentioned at the beginning, Geometry Dash. But Geometry Dash is always like kind of this like dumping ground for like fun ideas. But line writer has always been like a space for like more thoughtful narratives. Like, I don't know if it's something to do with the form of it, or if it's also related to the incredible community surrounding it and how people will actually like take the work you make seriously. Like, that's, I mean, it sounds simple, but other communities can't do it. The Geometry Dash community is, I mean, it's huge, so there's gonna be people who take it seriously, but just not very many. In the chain reaction community, which we kind of abandoned, I mean, we stopped making domino art, but it's a tough place to be in because it's a very small community and it's very male and it's very, no one means to be like transphobic, but it's there's no other trans people, and also most of the community is so young to not really like to really get it. And I remember like distinctly there was this one really incredible machine builder who posted like maybe like 300 machines to her YouTube channel. Just this unstoppable force of machine making. But she started like slowing down, and at the same time, like she stopped using like her voice in the videos. And the person's name is Allison Drake, but they had a different name beforehand, like a male dead name. And she started like slowly like kind of revealing like little things. Like she started like dropping like little hints in her videos, like the Lady of Many Names presents this this machine. She reset her number of machines because she would like number every machine like up to like 300, but then she just like started over. She was like considering like, I might just delete all my machines. And it took a long time for anyone to actually like understand like, oh, this person is trans, because people just don't fucking know about it in this place. Like, I've tried to, like, be like, hey, like, let's talk more about this, and, like, Discord chats, and be like, hey, this is important, like, let's not, like, just be silent about this, and let's actually discuss it, and then I just get, like, thumbs up reacts, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a reason that, like, every, like, trans person who does dominoes fucking is not doing dominoes now. It's very, like, uniquely isolating in this way. And it's just, like, suddenly, like, oh my god, I can't, like, relate to these people and their humor and, like, the way that they talk about their art. Like, there's another trans woman who hasn't posted in, like, a year. It seems like she still builds, but a little bit, but just, like, nowhere near as much as before. And then I've tried to be different. Like, I'm gonna try to stick around to this. And it's just, like, not happening. I think what I want in the future is just, like, to be understood and to have people who are going to understand and are going to be responsive about these things and actually, like, show up and be there. It's tricky to talk about, but I think, yeah, that's what I want the most right now. And I want everyone who's, like, going through this kind of thing to also have, like, those safe spaces and be open about those things. And for me, Line Rider is a place for that. It is a place of that open expression and that openness, even though I don't know a lot of, like, the main community, but in particular, like, the artist Discord was so instrumental to making the piece how it was. I would never have the inspiration and the confidence to, like, go into this project how we did if it weren't for, like, the community and the communal experience of making this art piece. And having more things like that in the future, having more spaces like that in other forms of art making. We're probably going to go into music making, like career-wise and like studying that. But I think the most important thing is to build connections through the art and to really let art be a safe space for people to explore these things, explore queerness, explore nature, and explore yourself and your relationships and your connections. And yeah, that's what I want. I want people to feel safe.
Yeah.
And to connect, basically. Both in Line Writer and everywhere else.
Thank you so much, Jade, for this really incredible interview.
Thank you too, yes.
Thank you all for listening. There'll be more episodes in the future.
Yeah, I was very rambly. Thank you.
No,
for
it was perfect. It was
putting
perfect.
up with this.
No, it was amazing. It was amazing first episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited for what is to come with this series as well. That's
Yeah.
great.
We'll see.